The crash was violent, shaking the ship's fragile hull like a leaf in a storm. Jack gripped the control panel, his knuckles white, as the engine sputtered and died. A loud thud echoed through the cabin, and his head slammed against the dashboard. Blood trickled down his forehead, but it barely registered. He was too focused on the ground rushing toward him. The ship's systems were failing. Desperation clawed at him as he fought with the controls, trying to steer the doomed vessel away from the jagged cliffs below. But it was no use. There was no time, no way out. With a final, deafening crash, the ship slammed into the ground. The world turned upside down, and everything went black. When Jack woke, the first thing he noticed was the pain. His body felt like it had been smashed into a wall, his muscles screaming with every movement. But worse than the physical pain was the quiet. The eerie silence of the alien planet stretched out around him, broken only by the distant hum of the wreckage. He groaned, struggling to sit up. His head throbbed, and the world swayed like he was still in freefall. The ship was a wreck. Smoke and fire curled from its twisted frame, and the cockpit was barely recognizable. There was no way to fix it, no way to call for help, no way to escape. Jack stumbled out of the wreckage, his legs weak beneath him. He had no idea where he was. The terrain was unfamiliar, strange, wide, open plains stretching out as far as the eye could see, dotted with odd rock formations and twisted trees. A hot, dry wind stung his face as he stumbled forward, dragging himself through the desolation. The communication systems were down, and there was no sign of life. No animals, no vegetation, just empty space and the thick silence of the unknown. He looked up at the sky. There was no sun, just a pale, yellowish glow. The atmosphere felt different too. The air was heavy, almost suffocating, as if the entire planet was holding its breath. He had to find shelter, somewhere safe at least until he could figure out what to do next. But as he stumbled forward, exhaustion pressing down on him, he heard something. It was faint at first, a whisper like the sound of a breeze, but there was something strange about it, something unnatural. It didn't sound like a wind at all. It was a voice. "You're lost, human." Jack froze, his heart racing. The voice echoed inside his mind, a soft feminine whisper that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. He looked around, panic rising in his chest, but there was no one, no figure in sight, nothing but the empty, barren world. His first thought was that he was hallucinating. The crash had taken a toll on him. Maybe the head injury had triggered some kind of mental break. But the voice was clear, direct. It wasn't just in his head. It felt real. Who are you?" Jack whispered, his throat dry. He felt ridiculous talking to the empty air, but the voice wouldn't go away. "I am Seraphina, Princess of Serathos." The voice responded, cool and calm, but with an undeniable weight. "I can hear your thoughts, human. I can feel your pain." Jack's breath caught in his throat. Serathos. He had no idea what that was. The name didn't sound like anything he had encountered in his training. And what was talking to him like this? He could feel a strange pressure building in his mind, as though the voice was inside him, not just around him. "Are you real?" Jack asked cautiously, still looking around the barren landscape for any sign of someone or something. Was this some kind of alien communication system? Some high-tech trick? "I am as real as you are." The voice was patient, but firm. "I offer you a gift, Jack, a gift of strength. You are weak now, but I can help you. I can make you powerful. I can help you survive this world." Jack's heart pounded harder. This was insane. He was stranded on an alien planet, with no idea what had happened to his crew. And now some mysterious voice was offering him strength. It sounded like a dream, or worse, some kind of trap. But as he listened to the voice, he felt something deep inside him stir. A strange, unfamiliar sensation, like the promise of something more. "Why me?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "Why are you helping me?" "Because you are destined for more." The voice was soft, almost pitying. "You are not like the others. You have something inside you, something that can be shaped, something that can change this world. You have the strength to survive, Jack. But first, you must accept the gift I offer." Jack's mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. What kind of gift? And what did this mysterious voice want in return? Was this some alien trick, or was this his only chance to survive? He clenched his fists, feeling the weight of the decision before him. What was he supposed to do? Could he trust this voice? Could he trust Serafina? He was alone. He had nothing left. And in that moment, he realized something. He didn't have much to lose. Jack took a deep breath, steeling himself for whatever was coming next. "What do I have to do?" he asked, his voice steady despite the fear that still churned in his stomach. There was a pause, a strange sense of satisfaction in the air. Then the voice spoke again, and Jack felt something warm spread through his chest, filling him with energy. "You only need to accept." A surge of power washed over him, a feeling like electricity running through his veins. His muscles tightened, his senses sharpened. The air around him seemed to pulse with energy, and for the first time since he crashed, Jack felt something he hadn't felt before: hope. The world wasn't as silent now. The wind picked up, swirling around him, and the distant hum of the planet seemed to echo in his ears. Jack stood straighter, more aware of his surroundings. He could feel the pulse of something alien, something powerful within him. "You will not be alone, Jack. I will guide you." And with those final words, the voice faded away, leaving Jack standing in the stillness of Xerathos. His body felt different, stronger, faster. But the weight of what had just happened was beginning to settle on him. This was no ordinary gift. And whatever Serafina's true motives were, Jack knew one thing for sure: his life would never be the same again. Jack woke up the next day, his body aching but his mind racing. The strange energy that had filled him the night before still thrummed beneath his skin, like a current of electricity running just under the surface. He didn't know what to make of it. One moment, he was on the brink of death, and the next, he was alive, stronger than he had ever felt. His muscles were tense, his reflexes sharp, his senses heightened. Even the air around him felt different, charged with power. But as the sun began to rise over the alien horizon, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning, and the journey ahead would be far from easy. He had no idea how he was supposed to use this newfound strength, or what Serafina's gift truly meant. Was it a blessing or a curse? He still wasn't sure if he could trust her. The voice in his head was calm, almost soothing, but there was an edge to it, something in the way she spoke that made him wonder if she had an agenda. Why had she chosen him? And what did she want in return? As the day passed, Jack began to test the limits of his new abilities. He picked up rocks, pushing his newfound strength to see how far it could go. He was surprised to find that the weight of a stone that would have been nearly impossible to lift just hours ago felt light in his hands. He threw it across the barren landscape, watching as it sailed through the air with an ease he couldn't explain. He felt invincible. But that was when he heard it. A rustling sound in the distance. It wasn't the wind. Something, or someone, was coming. Jack froze, his senses on high alert. He listened carefully, his heart racing. The sound was getting closer, and the tension in the air seemed to thicken. It was like the planet itself was holding its breath. Before he could react, a group of figures emerged from the shadows of the strange, twisted trees nearby. They were humanoid, tall, with skin as dark as night and eyes glowing with an unnatural light. They wore jagged armor, their weapons gleaming in the faint light of the sky. Jack's heart skipped a beat. These weren't the wild creatures he had expected to encounter. These were soldiers, Cyrith soldiers, the ones Serafina had warned him about. He hadn't even seen them coming, and now they were closing in fast. The soldiers didn't speak, but their presence was enough to tell Jack that they were there for him. His breath caught in his throat, and for the first time since the crash, he felt real fear. He wasn't ready for this. He was just a human who had crash-landed on an alien planet, now suddenly imbued with powers he didn't fully understand. And yet, there they were, the enemies that Serafina had warned him about, intent on ending his life before he could become a real threat. His instincts screamed at him to run, but the power surging through him told him something different. He had the strength now. He could stand and fight. He could survive. With a deep breath, Jack took a step forward. The Scythe soldiers noticed him immediately, their sharp, glowing eyes locking onto him. Their movements were slow, deliberate, almost as if they were expecting him to flee. But Jack didn't move. Instead, he clenched his fists, feeling the electricity running through his veins. He could feel his senses sharpening, his muscles coiling like a spring, ready to unleash the force inside him. One of the Scythe soldiers raised a weapon, a long, jagged spear that shimmered with an unnatural light. The others followed suit, surrounding Jack in a half-circle. Jack's heart pounded in his chest, but his mind was clear. He could feel his body responding to the situation, the power within him guiding his actions. As the soldier with the spear lunged, Jack reacted without thinking. He sidestepped in an instant, faster than he had ever moved before. The spear sailed harmlessly past him, missing by mere inches. His mind raced. The power inside him was more than just physical strength. It was instinct. His body moved before he could even process it. He struck. With one swift motion, he launched himself at the nearest soldier, landing a crushing blow to its chest. The soldier crumpled to the ground in an instant, the air knocked out of it. Jack didn't stop there. He pivoted, feeling the surge of strength propel him forward. Another soldier lunged at him with a sword, but Jack was already there, grabbing the blade by the hilt and twisting it out of its grasp with ease. He tossed the sword aside and sent the soldier sprawling with a powerful punch to its abdomen. Jack stood over them, breathing heavily, his heart racing. He couldn't believe it. The soldiers who had once seemed so terrifying, so unstoppable, were now on the ground before him. He had done this. He had taken them down. The strength inside him had been enough. But as the last soldier struggled to rise, Jack could feel the power draining from him. It wasn't limitless. He wasn't invincible. Just then, Serafina's voice echoed in his mind, soft and steady. "Well done, Jack. You are stronger than I thought. But remember, this power is a double-edged sword. It will serve you, but it will also test you." Jack's pulse quickened. He didn't fully understand what she meant, but one thing was clear. This power came with a price. He could feel it in his body. The strain, the exhaustion. Using the strength had drained him more than he expected. The last Seraph soldier scrambled to its feet, glaring at Jack with hatred. But before it could react, Jack was already moving again, faster than the soldier could follow. He tackled it to the ground, pinning it there. The soldier struggled beneath him, but Jack's grip was unyielding, and after a few seconds, it stopped moving. For a long moment, Jack stood over the defeated soldiers, his chest heaving with exertion. The power inside him was intoxicating, but the weight of the responsibility was becoming clearer. He wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. The gift Serafina had given him wasn't just about strength. It was about what he would choose to do with it. And that decision was coming, faster than he could imagine. The days following his battle with the Scythe soldiers passed in a blur. Jack felt the power inside him growing stronger, but at the same time, he couldn't shake the weight of uncertainty that pressed on him. Each time he used his new strength, he could feel the toll it took on his body. His muscles aching, his mind blurry with exhaustion. Serafina's voice was there to guide him, offering advice and encouragement, but there was something in her tone that Jack couldn't ignore. She was pushing him harder than he expected. "You must learn to control it, Jack. Power without control is useless." Serafina's voice echoed through his mind during his training, her words calm but firm. She was constantly testing him, making him push the limits of his new abilities. At first, Jack had thought he was becoming invincible, but the more he practiced, the more he realized the truth. Strength was only one part of the equation. Jack spent hours each day running, lifting, and sparring with imagined enemies, trying to hone his reflexes. His body felt different now, more alert, more agile. But it wasn't just about physical strength. He could feel the alien energy coursing through him, wrapping around his very being. At times, it was like an overwhelming surge, making him feel like he was about to lose control. Other times, it was a quiet, steady hum beneath his skin, urging him to move faster, think clearer. It was confusing and overwhelming. But Jack was determined. He didn't have a choice. One evening, after a particularly grueling training session, Jack collapsed onto the ground, his chest heaving for air. The world around him seemed to spin. Sweat dripped down his face, and every muscle in his body screamed in protest. He closed his eyes, trying to steady his breathing. Seraphina's presence lingered in the back of his mind, watching over him, but there was something different about her voice now. Something almost distant. "You're progressing faster than I expected, Jack," she said, though her tone was colder than usual. "But don't forget, your power comes at a cost. You will be tested, not just by the Sirith, but by something greater." Jack pushed himself up, wiping his face with the back of his hand. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "What's coming?" There was a pause before Seraphina answered, her voice quieter now, almost reluctant. "You will learn in time." Jack's heart skipped a beat. The vague, cryptic answer left him with more questions than ever. He had known from the start that Seraphina had her own plans, her own motivations, but now it was becoming clear that the situation was more complicated than he could have ever imagined. She had given him power, yes, but why? What did she really want from him? For the first time, Jack felt a flicker of doubt in his chest. What if he wasn't just a pawn in her game? What if the gift was something more sinister? And what was this greater threat she spoke of? He couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that something much worse was coming, something far beyond the Sirith soldiers he had already faced. But whatever it was, he had no choice but to be ready. That night, Jack slept fitfully, his dreams plagued by images of war, battles fought in the skies, alien armies clashing in the streets, and a strange shadow looming over everything. Every time he tried to make sense of the images, they slipped away, like water through his fingers. But one image remained clear, a dark figure, taller than any of the Sirith soldiers, standing in the center of a battlefield, surrounded by destruction. When Jack woke, his mind was still reeling from the dream. He sat up in the dirt, rubbing his eyes, trying to shake off the feeling of dread that lingered in the pit of his stomach. The world outside was quiet, almost too quiet. It was a feeling he couldn't explain, but he knew that something was coming. The next morning, he began to prepare. His training had to continue. He wasn't ready yet, but as he gathered his equipment and checked his surroundings, he felt the hair on the back of his neck stand on end. Something was wrong. It was then that he heard it. A rumble, low and thunderous, shook the ground beneath his feet. The sound was distant at first, but it grew louder, closer, as though the very planet was reacting to something. Jack's heart raced. This wasn't just an earthquake. It was something much worse. Suddenly, a shadow passed overhead. Jack looked up, and his breath caught in his throat. High above, he saw a massive ship descending from the sky. A ship unlike any he had ever seen before. It was sleek and dark, with strange markings glowing along its hull. The ship moved with precision, its descent controlled and deliberate. The ship was not here by accident. He knew immediately that this was the greater threat Seraphina had warned him about. The ship landed with a thunderous crash, sending a shockwave through the ground. Jack stumbled back, his instincts screaming at him to run. But he stood his ground, watching as the ship's massive doors slowly began to open. From within, figures stepped out, figures tall and imposing, wearing dark, ornate armor. They were unlike any creature Jack had encountered before. Their faces were hidden behind helmets, their bodies covered in black reflective plating. They radiated power, each step they took shaking the earth beneath them. At the front of the group was a figure unlike the rest. Taller, broader, his armor more intricate. His eyes gleamed from behind his helmet, glowing with a faint otherworldly light. This was no ordinary soldier. This was a leader. The leader raised his hand, and the soldiers around him fell into formation, surrounding Jack. The tension in the air was palpable. Jack's mind raced. Who were these people? What did they want with him? The leader's voice rang out, deep and commanding, but Jack could hear the strange distortion of the words. They weren't human, but somehow Jack understood. We've been watching you, human. The leader's words sent a chill down Jack's spine. You have been marked. Your strength will either destroy you, or it will make you the weapon we need. Jack's pulse quickened. He didn't understand what was happening, but he knew one thing. These were no ordinary enemies. They were something worse, and his power was already drawing attention. In the distance, Seraphina's voice cut through his thoughts, her tone more urgent than ever. Jack, this is it. They have found you. Jack clenched his fists, the power within him surging to the surface. He didn't know who these enemies were, but one thing was clear. He would have to face them, and he would need every ounce of strength to survive. The battle had only just begun. The soldiers circled around Jack, their eyes glowing with an intensity that made his skin crawl. He could feel their presence closing in, like predators waiting to strike. He tried to steady his breathing, to control the surge of power that was threatening to overwhelm him. His heart pounded in his chest, but his mind was sharp. The voice of Seraphina whispered urgently in his mind, her tone tinged with something he couldn't quite identify. Jack, you are not ready for this, but you must face them. These are no ordinary soldiers. They are part of the Krail, an elite force that answers to the Overseer. They are the ones who have hunted me for centuries. They are relentless. And now, they've come for you. The words felt like a heavy weight pressing down on his chest. Jack had no idea what the Krail were or who this Overseer was, but he understood one thing. He couldn't afford to let fear take over. These soldiers were not here for a simple skirmish. They were here for him. And that meant he had to fight. The leader of the group, towering and imposing, took a step forward. His helmet reflected the dim light of the alien sky, making it impossible to read his expression. But Jack could feel the malice in the air, thick and suffocating. The leader raised his hand, and the soldiers tensed, ready for an attack. Jack's body went rigid. He wasn't sure if he could take them all on. They looked like a force built for destruction, each one a weapon, deadly and precise. We know what you are, human. The leader's voice echoed through the silence, distorted and powerful. You have been touched by Seraphina. Her power has made you a threat, but we are the true force of this world. We will hunt you down until you are no more. Jack's fists clenched. The words touched by Seraphina stung. Was that how they saw him? As some kind of weapon, a threat to be neutralized. He didn't even know what she had really given him. But it didn't matter. He could feel the power surging through him, a quiet, persistent hum that seemed to make the very air around him vibrate. He couldn't run. He couldn't hide. The time for hesitation was over. With a roar, the first of the Krail soldiers charged, his weapon, a jagged, dark energy blade. Raised high, Jack's instincts kicked in. He sidestepped at the last second, just barely avoiding the deadly swing, and used the momentum to slam his shoulder into the soldier's chest. The impact sent the soldier flying back, crashing into the ground with a sickening thud. Jack barely had time to process the success before another soldier closed in, his eyes filled with fury. The battle was chaotic. Jack fought with everything he had, his new strength giving him the edge. His body moved faster than he had ever thought possible, his reflexes sharp, guided by some unseen force. Every punch, every strike, felt like it came from deep within, powered by the energy Seraphina had gifted him. But still, he could feel the strain, the weight of it all. It wasn't easy. It wasn't clean. He could feel the toll it was taking on his body, each move draining him more than the last. The Krail soldiers were relentless, attacking with precision and speed. They didn't give him a moment to breathe. But Jack fought back, his rage fueling him. The power that coursed through him gave him the strength to keep going, even when his muscles screamed in protest. But despite his best efforts, Jack began to realize something terrifying. The longer the fight went on, the harder it became to control the power inside him. He could feel it growing more erratic, like a wild storm threatening to break loose. With every strike, with every move, the energy inside him threatened to consume him entirely. The leader watched, his gaze fixed on Jack with a cold, calculating intensity. He didn't move to intervene, letting his soldiers do the work. It was almost as if he were waiting for something. A moment of weakness, an opening. Jack ducked under a blow and spun to face his next attacker. But that was when he felt it. The sudden surge of power, an overwhelming wave that seemed to crash through him, rattling his bones. His vision blurred, and for a split second, he felt like he was drowning in the force within him. His body trembled, and he barely managed to regain control, just in time to block a powerful strike from a Krail soldier. Seraphina's voice cut through the fog of his mind, sharp and urgent. "You need to focus, Jack. You're losing control." But Jack wasn't sure he could hold it together much longer. The strength that Seraphina had given him was a gift, but it felt like a curse. Each time he used it, it became harder to control. The Krail soldiers were wearing him down, and he could feel himself slipping, his power slowly slipping out of his grasp. A cry broke his concentration. He turned just in time to see the leader of the Krail raise his hand, and suddenly, a bolt of dark energy shot out from his palm, heading straight for Jack. The force of it was unlike anything Jack had faced. His instincts screamed at him to dodge, but his body was slow to react. The blast struck him in the chest, sending him hurtling backward into the dirt. Jack crashed to the ground with a grunt, his vision swimming. His body ached, and the weight of the battle seemed to press down on him all at once. He could feel the power inside him, still there, still alive, but it was dimming. The longer he fought, the weaker it became. He tried to push himself up, but his arms felt like lead. The leader stepped forward, towering over him, his weapon glowing ominously. "You are weak, human. You cannot defeat us." The leader's voice was full of disdain. But Jack refused to give in. The thought of losing now, of failing, fueled something deep within him. His vision cleared, and his body surged with energy once more, the power returning in waves. He gritted his teeth, forcing himself to his feet, ignoring the pain. "I'm not done yet." Jack's voice was hoarse, but there was fire in it now, determination, a refusal to back down. He charged, his feet pounding against the earth as he collided with the leader's soldiers, his fists flying, his body moving with unnatural speed. His energy felt different now, more focused, more controlled. He had learned to harness it, just for a moment. It wasn't enough to defeat the Krail, but it was enough to make them think twice. The leader's eyes narrowed as Jack closed in on him, his soldiers now hesitant, backing away. The moment of hesitation was all Jack needed. He leaped forward, using every ounce of his strength to deliver a blow that landed squarely on the leader's chest. The impact knocked the leader back, sending him to the ground with a crash. The soldiers around him froze. Jack stood over him, chest heaving, sweat dripping from his face. His body screamed in protest, but he wasn't done yet. He knew he had to finish this, before they could regroup, before they could destroy him. For the first time since landing on Xerathos, Jack felt a surge of true power, control over it. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was fighting back. The battle wasn't over, but for the first time, he could see the chance of victory, and he wasn't going to let it slip away. Jack's pulse raced as he stood over the fallen leader of the Krail soldiers, his chest heaving with exertion. The air around him felt heavy, charged with the lingering tension of the battle. The Krail soldiers had pulled back, retreating into their formation, their once confident stance now filled with hesitation. Jack had done it. He had struck down their leader, at least temporarily. But he knew this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. The leader of the Krail had crumpled to the ground. His helmet cracked, revealing a glimpse of a face beneath, pale, with sharp, angular features that seemed to shimmer unnaturally. But Jack didn't have time to dwell on the details. He could already feel the others regrouping, moving to take him down. The Krail were relentless. "You've made a mistake, human." The leader's voice was low but filled with venom as he slowly rose to his feet. The crack in his helmet was healing. Some kind of advanced tech, Jack realized with a chill. These weren't just soldiers. They were weapons made to withstand everything. Jack's stomach clenched. He had no illusions now. This wasn't some random fight. The Krail weren't just here for a battle. They were here for him. And that meant they would stop at nothing to destroy him. He could feel the power inside him, that surge of strength Seraphina had given him, but it was wavering. The intensity of the battle, the use of his abilities, had taken a toll. It was like trying to hold on to something slippery, something that could slip from his grasp at any moment. His hands trembled as he clenched them into fists, fighting against the fatigue. He needed to hold on for just a little longer. But the Krail soldiers were closing in. The group's formation shifted, and Jack could feel their eyes on him, calculating, analyzing. They were waiting for him to make the next move, and he wasn't sure he had the strength left to make it. Then, Seraphina's voice rang through his mind again, more urgent this time. "Focus, Jack. You are stronger than you realize. Control the energy. Don't let it control you." Her words were like a lifeline. Jack took a deep breath, trying to push past the overwhelming pressure. He had been thinking about the power like it was an external force, something outside of him, that he had to wield. But Seraphina was right. It wasn't just power. It was part of him. And if he wanted to survive, he needed to embrace it, not fight it. Slowly, he closed his eyes, focusing on the hum deep within him. The energy that had once felt like a dangerous storm now felt like a river flowing through him. He could feel its currents, its ebb and flow, as if it were something he could guide rather than simply use. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but Jack allowed it to settle, to center him. He opened his eyes, his gaze locking onto the advancing Krail soldiers. This time, he wasn't just reacting to them. He was in control. He could feel the shift in his body, in his mind. Every movement felt sharper, more deliberate. The battle was still on, but now Jack was ready. One of the soldiers lunged at him, a long blade raised high. Jack moved instinctively, his body flowing like water around the attack. He ducked under the strike, then with a swift motion, grabbed the soldier's wrist and twisted. The weapon clattered to the ground, and the soldier let out a strangled cry as Jack slammed his fist into the soldier's chest. The blow sent the soldier flying backward, crashing into the ground with a force that cracked the earth beneath him. The others hesitated. For a brief moment, they faltered. Jack's control over his strength had taken them by surprise. He wasn't the same human who had crash-landed on Zarathos anymore. He had become something else, something dangerous. But the Krail were no strangers to adversity. They recovered quickly, two soldiers charging in unison, weapons raised. Jack didn't hesitate. He could feel the power surging again, but this time he knew how to guide it. He darted to the side, letting the soldiers' attacks pass by him, before using the momentum of their movements against them. His hand shot out, grabbing one soldier's arm and twisting it behind him, while his foot connected with the other soldier's midsection, sending him sprawling to the ground. The Krail leader, still recovering from the initial blow, watched the battle unfold with cold fury in his eyes. His soldiers were being overwhelmed, but he wasn't about to lose his composure. With a flick of his hand, he called for backup, and suddenly, Jack's world was filled with the hum of more ships descending from the sky. Jack's eyes widened. More soldiers. This wasn't just a skirmish anymore. This was a full-on invasion. There's no escape now, human. The leader's voice rang out, almost mocking in its confidence. You cannot defeat the Krail. We are endless, and you are nothing. The words stung, but Jack didn't let them take root. He had no intention of giving up. He wasn't just fighting for his survival anymore. He was fighting for something bigger, something Seraphina had hinted at, something he still couldn't fully comprehend. He turned toward the new wave of soldiers, his muscles tense, his mind clear. This time, the power inside him didn't feel like a storm. It felt like a fire, steady and burning, ready to consume everything in its path. The first soldier to reach him swung a weapon, a sharp, jagged blade, toward his head. Jack sidestepped, his reflexes enhanced by the strange energy inside him. And before the soldier could recover, Jack grabbed the soldier's arm and twisted it with a force that sent the blade flying. In the same motion, Jack drove his knee into the soldier's stomach, knocking the wind out of him. The soldier crumpled to the ground, unconscious. Another soldier came at him, but this time, Jack wasn't just reacting. He was anticipating, moving before the soldier even made his move. His body flowed with grace, his feet light on the ground as he used every ounce of his enhanced abilities. The soldier's blade came too close, but Jack caught it in midair, twisting it from the soldier's grasp, before using the blade to strike at the soldier's side, sending him down in one clean motion. But despite his success, Jack could feel the fatigue creeping in. The power wasn't infinite. His muscles were aching, and the energy inside him felt like it was starting to burn out. He needed to end this, and fast. Just as he was about to make his move, the ground shook violently beneath him, sending ripples of energy through the landscape. He stumbled, trying to keep his balance, but the force was overwhelming. His heart raced. What now? In the distance, a massive shadow loomed. Another ship, larger than any of the others, descending from the sky with a deafening roar. This ship was different. It had the markings of the Krail's highest command. This was no ordinary soldier. This was the Overseer. Jack's heart sank. It was clear now. This wasn't just a battle. This was a war. Jack stood, panting heavily, his body trembling with exhaustion. The surge of power that had once felt like a gift now seemed like a curse. His muscles screamed for rest, and his mind was clouded with the weight of what was to come. He could feel the energy flickering inside him, wavering as the strain of continuous combat began to take its toll. Despite his impressive progress in controlling the strange strength Seraphina had given him, he was starting to reach his limit. But that wasn't the worst part. The massive ship descending from the sky cast an ominous shadow across the battlefield, dwarfing everything around it. This wasn't just another Krail ship. This was something far more powerful. It was massive, its sleek, black form gleaming under the twin suns of Serathos. The markings that covered its hull were intricate, unlike anything Jack had seen before, glowing with an eerie, otherworldly light. This was the Overseer's ship, the true heart of the Krail Empire, and its presence sent a chill down Jack's spine. He knew that if he had been fighting an army before, he was about to face something far worse. The Overseer wasn't just a soldier. The Overseer was a leader, a commander with power beyond anything Jack could comprehend. As the ship hovered just above the ground, the air seemed to ripple with anticipation. Jack's vision blurred slightly, his head spinning as he tried to steady himself. His hand gripped his chest, feeling the faint pulsing of the energy inside him. It was still there, but he knew he couldn't rely on it forever. The massive doors of the overseer's ship opened with a deafening clang. From within, a figure emerged, a silhouette framed against the fiery sky. Jack's breath caught in his throat. The overseer was unlike anything he had ever seen. The figure was tall, towering above the other Krail soldiers, draped in dark, intricate armor that shimmered like liquid shadow. The helmet was shaped like an elongated skull, its hollow eye sockets glowing with a faint, malevolent light. The overseer's presence was overwhelming. Even from this distance, Jack could feel the weight of the being's gaze, as if the overseer was studying him, measuring him, determining his worth. The Krail soldiers parted as the figure strode forward, their posture shifting from militant to reverent. Jack's blood ran cold. This was no ordinary battle. This was a test of strength, of survival. Human. The overseer's voice rang out, deep and resonant, sending ripples through the air. The sound was distorted, like it came from a place far beyond physical space, reverberating inside Jack's skull. You think you can defy us, that you can stand against the Krail. Jack swallowed hard, forcing his legs to stay steady beneath him. His fists clenched, his teeth gritted. I'm not backing down. The overseer's laugh was a low, guttural sound, like the growl of some ancient beast. You think you have control over the power you wield, but you do not understand it. The overseer took another step forward, his enormous form casting a shadow that seemed to swallow the light around it. You are nothing but a tool, a weapon. And like all weapons, you will break. Jack could feel his pulse quicken. The overseer's words hit him harder than he expected. He wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. This wasn't about personal glory. The stakes were higher than he realized. The overseer was right in one thing. Jack didn't fully understand the power inside him. Seraphina had given him this strength, but she had kept her intentions shrouded in mystery. Why had she chosen him? Why had she trusted him with this gift? No. Jack's voice rang out, shaky but determined. I'm not your weapon, and I'm not your pawn. The overseer's eyes narrowed, his gaze burning through Jack with an intensity that made him feel small, insignificant. You dare defy me, human. You think you are different from the rest. Before Jack could respond, the overseer raised his hand, and the very air around him seemed to tremble. A wave of energy, darker and more powerful than anything Jack had felt before, rippled outward, crashing into him like an invisible fist. Jack's breath caught in his throat as the wave of energy slammed into his chest, knocking the wind out of him. His knees buckled, and he hit the ground hard, the shock reverberating through his body. For a moment, everything went black. Jack gasped for air, his chest aching, his mind spinning. He could feel the energy swirling around him, mocking him, a force he could no longer control. He struggled to stand, but his limbs felt heavy, unresponsive. Through the haze of pain, Seraphina's voice echoed in his mind, sharper now, almost desperate. Jack, you mustn't let him overwhelm you. Focus. Focus on what you are, not what they want you to be. You are stronger than this. He heard her, but it was like trying to listen through a wall. The weight of the overseer's power pressed down on him, suffocating him. He could feel the alien energy burning through him, not as a gift, but as a curse. It was too much, too fast, too overwhelming. But Jack didn't give up. He couldn't. He pushed against the ground, his hands gripping the dirt, as if it were the only thing holding him to reality. Slowly, he forced himself to his feet, the power surging inside him like a flood. His mind cleared, his focus sharpening. Seraphina's words reached him again, clearer this time. Remember, Jack, the power is within you. You are not just the vessel. You are the storm. His eyes snapped open, and the world around him seemed to freeze. The power inside him, it was his, not Seraphina's, not the overseer's. It was his to command. With a roar, Jack surged forward, propelled by his newfound understanding of the energy inside him. His body was lighter, faster, stronger, like a wild force of nature, untamed, and unpredictable. He closed the distance between himself and the Overseer in an instant, his fist crashing into the Overseer's armor with a force that made the ground tremble. The impact sent a shockwave rippling through the air, and the Overseer staggered back for the first time. For a brief moment, Jack saw the faintest flicker of surprise in the Overseer's glowing eyes. The energy inside Jack surged higher, flooding him with strength and purpose. The Overseer, for all his power, was now on the defensive. "You are strong, human, but you are not invincible," the Overseer hissed, his voice filled with fury. "You are still nothing compared to the might of the Krail." But Jack didn't flinch. This time, it was different. The energy inside him wasn't a weapon to be wielded. It wasn't a gift to be used or discarded at will. It was a part of him, a force he could control. He was no longer the confused, powerless human who had crashed on this alien planet. He was a warrior, his own warrior. And the Krail would learn that the hard way. With another roar, Jack charged, ready to face the Overseer in the final battle that would decide the fate of Xerathos.